You can call the roll.
Allers,
Present.
Hazelton, Joe. Here. Lester.
Here.
Michael, Neely, Schwartz.
Here.
Spencer.
Here.
Spicer. Young.
Present.
We have 6 here. We have a quorum.
Seeing no public in attendance other than Ms. Smith, who I'm assuming doesn't want to say anything. We'll move on to discussion, and most of you have been here. We're just kind of taking a step back from regular budget negotiations and talking about the potential shortfall that we're seeing. Not potential, we know it's going to happen. So how we're going to handle that, bringing the bigger departments up to try to share with us their concerns and the areas of their budget that will be most likely impacted if we have to go through some sort of a reduction scenario. So today I plan on this being kind of our last one. I really hope that the new folks that will be on the council have paid attention and have an understanding of a really dire situation that is highly possible to come about over the next fiscal year or maybe 2 fiscal years. So without further ado, I think we'll ask the parks to go first. And
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Mr. Brunner had a meeting with the state, but he said he would be here as we get into our meeting, just for FYI.
We've been here long enough to skip.
I drew the short straw.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate the time to speak in front of you in regards to our current, and then not only the current, but ongoing budgets. We, as J.C. Parks, understand the need to make tough financial decisions, and we're committed to finding solutions and minimize our impact on services. Our priority is to maintain the quality of programs and resources that our community relies on. We're actually exploring ways to operate more efficiently and identify alternative funding sources within the department. Some of those key ways that we're exploring that we've implemented over the past year, we've done a great job. We put together a capital improvement plan subcommittee. So we've started to forecast 5 years out. So when it comes to any type of financial cuts, we'd be able to look at the list and see what could potentially come off, which could be postponed. Staff are doing cost recovery reports on programs to identify where they fall within the goals of the department, where programs should be subsidized, where they shouldn't be subsidized, and what percentage. So staff are doing a good job. We've made strides. We're not where we need to be as far as cost recovery formers, but we're certainly moving the needle. Grants. This is something within our department that has not really been tapped into over the last several years. However, we are actively looking at grants and grant opportunities and how we can fund additional projects that would cost taxpayers as well as our departments less of a financial burden. And then our J.C. Parks Foundation, they're going to be our key to our success moving forward. So we are actively, they used to meet once a year. When I took over in this role, we started to meet with them on a regular basis because when it comes to fundraising and to help fund some of those projects moving forward, they're going to be a key to our success as well. So I have to commend staff for some of the steps we've already made in regards to the financial situation of now as well as in the future. We will continue to operate in a reasonable financial manner. As it pertains to our budget, I apologize I wasn't here for the last one, but I think some of the departments gave updates on percentages of salaries. Currently, our staff, our departments, 35% is salaries, 44% is approximately operational supplies, and then 22% is capital improvement projects. So, like I said, moving forward, we understand that any future financial impacts on budgets would essentially impact not only our potential projects, it would also potentially affect our staffing moving forward because as we start to think about not only the projects that we have going on, but the inventory that we have in our park system. It's growing. When we take on River Market, it's estimated that's going to cost approximately $125,000 to maintain on an annual basis. So once again, I think that we're currently working smarter when it comes to financial decisions within J.C. Parks, but we are definitely paying attention to why we're here, not only for this, but sales tax, and we want to make sure that we're doing our due justice when it comes to making smart decisions. So with that being said, it's kind of brief, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So what would you consider your three biggest concerns right now as far as facility-wise? Memorial pool, et cetera.
That's a great question. I have some notes here. One is Memorial Pool. Through the Water's Edge assessment, we identified that that's what's going to be about a $1.2 to $1.5 million project to extend the life of the pool approximately 5 to 10 years. That was one. The other ones that I had made a note on, currently we're doing the inclusive park playground accessibility study. Once we find out the findings and recommendations from that study, we are looking to construct an inclusive park playground destination park. That's estimated that it would be potentially $1 to $1.5 million, depends upon what features we add in that. Some of the other projects that we have that are out there that we've not pulled the trigger on per se, the botanical garden for that first phase to really renovate around the manor, to bring that up to ADA, because right now there's 4 steps going into that facility, and then also get the master gardeners involved with that project. We're at a shortfall right now of about $500,000 for that project. Boggs Creek, that's one that was a project that was awarded to the city through the TAP grant. Keep in mind that when that was awarded, that was about a $1 million project. I think where we are in today's times, I think you could easily say that that's probably about a 1.2 to 1.5 potentially. I know that we're doing some hydraulic testing on the area out there to identify what the bridges will look like, because that's going to be the financial impact on what that project's really going to be. So we're working through that. But once again, we're trying to do that project the best we can with the minimizing the overall cost of what was budgeted for that. And then moving forward, Councilman Schwartz, to answer your question, I think staff are doing a good job. One of the key things we're doing is we're really rehabbing and renovating a lot of projects, a lot of facilities that had been neglected over the years. For instance, we're doing some the pickleball restrooms, concessions, renovations. We just did the restrooms out at the Bender Park where the playground's going to go. You think of other facilities that need renovations. Greenberry, that was one that needs some dire attention. That was projected about $400,000. That was about 3 times what we were originally told it would cost. So that's out there, ready to go. So a lot of maintenance on stuff that's currently in our inventory has been identified. As we look through our next 5 years, we're kind of doing the stuff that isn't all the wow stuff necessarily, but we've identified that we've got to take care of what we currently have before we really can migrate to a lot of new. So it's that balance, and that's what we're trying to do. And even though we have a 5-year plan, it changes all the time. It almost changes monthly, weekly, because we identify like this needs to be moved up from next year to this year because of if the roof's leaking, if there's electrical issues, et cetera. So, because we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community, whether it's through their request or their safety.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
As far as the amphitheater goes, are we getting any better at producing close to break even?
That's a great question. Yes, I'm confident, and I brought Andrew with me, who also manages our finances. Last year at this time, we had 3 shows on the books. This year, we're sitting at 13. We've challenged them. We've set goals for VenueWorks. They didn't have goals in the past. I set goals with them to bring in at least 15 to 18 shows. Last year, we subsidized, Andrew, was about 40,000? Yes. So this year, our goal is essentially to at least break even, if not bring in a profit. So I have to commend VenueWorks, and the goals that we set, they're meeting them, and I'm confident that based on ticket sales, of course, I think we're gonna do that.
And then my last question is, walk me through how you all determine what fees you're going to charge for, not everything, but anything from like golf to child participation in baseball to what it costs to get in the swimming pool. Do you evaluate those every year? Does the commission do that? How's that work?
That is an area that we're certainly working on when it comes to the cost recovery, but then we're also going to start to incorporate pre-planning so they can kind of put in a cost estimate prior to a season, prior to a program, to identify where it is. Typically, in some situations, such as the pools, I think they look at, 50-cent increase, every year or every other year. However, with these modeling that we're going to be doing, it's going to clearly identify what we really need to do, whether we're actually priced too high, if we're priced fair in the market, or what adjustments we need to do. Then if we have any type of fee adjustments, we take them to our committees, our subcommittees, whether it's park resources, recreational services, golf course advisory. We make the recommendation for fee increases there. It gets approved out of the committee, and then at that time, we take it to the Parks Commission, and then they essentially approve it as the board.
So do you have any so I jotted down just the first four that you mentioned. So Memorial Pool is a revenue generator, but the inclusive park would not be, correct?
Not from a revenue source through the department, but as an economic impact within the community, it would.
The botanical garden, there's no charge for that or anything?
Correct, same thing.
And then the Boggs Creek is just a trail, right?
Correct.
And so, do you have any concern that if we keep putting these non-revenue generating things in our city, that sooner or later, we're just not going to have the money to support them?
Yeah, and actually, when we originally looked at like a 10-year, we started talking about once we get through a lot of the renovations and some of the smaller projects that we need to get done, what does it look like as far as generating additional revenue moving forward? I know that through conversations, we kind of jokingly talked about, what could we do at the golf course to make it like a Topgolf an event space. So certainly it's being addressed. It's just we haven't identified what does that look like. We most certainly have to do so because we can't continue to do what we've always done and continue and think we can continue to grow on the revenue side. We've got to change. We have to.
I think, honestly, from the state perspective, we kind of saw that with our state parks, that we were donated or given or bought, and all of a sudden we got way more stuff than we can pay for, and we got so far behind. And
sure,
fortunately, I think the state has been able to catch up a little bit. But Jeff,
I want to commend you on that, Aaron, as far as looking out ahead. Let's take a look back at what we need to maintain and all that. Great planning and all that. Do you all take care of the downtown and everything along High Street and a few of the streets as far as maintaining that? Or is that the Downtown Business Association?
That's a good question. That's the Downtown Association. However, when it comes to trees and some of the plantings, the Parks has assisted in that in the past. However, we do have a meeting coming up with that on Monday to really make sure everybody's at the table that understands what their role is. So we have an upcoming meeting on that.
And then the last thing, having gone back and looked at the down in by Boggs Creek and been able to look at all that, there's, if people haven't been back there, the two things that I would be excited about, but I understand, there's different, you can see how the water's washed out a lot of the areas, so the bridges you were talking about and how that is going to have to impact that whole area is going to cost a lot. That retaining wall that I talked to you about the old World War II shooting range back there, I don't think a lot of people know about it. It's really interesting to incorporate that, but as far as long-term planning and looking at the situation we're in, I'm glad to see that was on there, but I don't know how I like the way you are flexible enough to move up and down depending on the need for all that. So I don't know, do we lose money if we don't go ahead with this project from that TAP grant? Or do you have a certain time period it has to be done in?
Well, the first step is, like I said, Bartlett and West is doing the hydraulic testing now to really identify what we can do as far as the bridges. To answer your question, we've talked about it as a park commission. I don't think it would be the right thing to do is to pull that because it could have long-term effects when we apply for future grants down the road. I think it could leave a bad taste in their mouth to say, hey, we were willing to do this. Not that it's never happened, but I think as a city, we want to try to complete what was proposed initially because we did work on it, they did work on it. So let's be good stewards of the application process and try to get it to the finish line.
Thank you.
Councilman Spencer.
First off, I just want to say thank you for a change in strategy and philosophy about maintaining existing infrastructure that the park system has, and that you're not continuously relying on increases in revenue to build the next biggest shiny thing in our community. And I know you've really have tried to trim your budget, your predecessor. I exposed his abuse of taking lunches and meals on the taxpayer's dime, and you immediately changed that. And I just want to thank you publicly for doing that and getting some of the trust back with me and within the Parks Department. And as it relates to the capital improvement sales tax contribution that your department receives, I think, and there is an example of this. There is some concerns within the neighborhood, though, that I just got done meeting with some residents. But there on Tree Valley Lane, there's going to be a trail.
The creek trail?
The creek trail
Yeah.
there. And obviously there were some grant funds utilized there. But if there's opportunities where within the capital improvement sales tax model that Public Works and Parks can coordinate those dollars to benefit not only parks and trail users, but also the average citizen who drives and on roads. And that is something that that neighborhood does have concern about with there on Tree Valley, the condition of the road, and with improvements being made to that trail, if there could be better coordination between those two departments of making the necessary repairs to the road after the fact of heavy construction equipment being on that and deteriorating those roads even further. So, and tree removal too. There's concerns about that. But the big point in this discussion was, and I think you guys have done a better job than the past, but continue the coordination of those kinds of dollars being able to be leveraged more in the community.
And you hit the nail on the head because we are on this project. It is parks, it is public works, it's sewer. Anybody miss Sheila? There's a whole list of us. So we are working better together, not only from the standpoint of projects, but utilization of equipment. I think the conversation of like, hey, can we borrow this? Or hey, can we borrow that? I think all of us as department heads, we're doing a much better job on that too. So I have to commend all of our department heads for not only the projects, but the equipment as well.
But I commend you, though, as the Parks Director, for you making those first initial steps to garner a better relationship with that.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilman Lester.
Unlike most city assets and services, you have some venues that we have big events come in to use those venues, the Link and now Pender and I think other ball fields and things. Do you ever, with those, do you track or try to track maybe with visitors and Convention Visitors Bureau how much tax revenue you get generated from those different events that happen every year?
Yeah.
They're quite big, some of them.
Yeah, so as far as really, we're not really directly involved with CVB on the tax credits. We're more of the economic impact that it provides to our community. For instance, the Link is approximately, last year was about $6 million, estimated at $6 million. The ball fields was about a 1.5. So we are actively looking at what our parks facilities do. With our flock cameras at the parks, some of our parks were able to track utilization through vehicle counts now to be able to see how many park users are coming in. We're not doing any financial impacts or economic impact on those numbers, but we are starting to track a lot more. We do the bridge counts at Deborah Cooper Park. That was about 86,000 last year, which was up about 11,000 from the year before. So we're doing a lot of little things to really start to put a method in place to really start to find the financial impact that we're making outside of just within parks.
Okay, no, I think that's important that the public know about those impacts.
Sure.
And just about the Lincoln, our relationship with Lincoln, maybe say a little bit about that. I think it's going really well, but.
It is. You know, our relationship, I like to point out two relationships to answer your question. The first one being Lincoln it is a great relationship. President Mosley and I have worked together almost since day one together when it came to the facility of the link. But it's also expanded outside of that. When it comes to career fairs and stuff like that, we have that relationship where we're now at the table when they have those career fairs because we're trying to really employ a lot of their students. Lincoln, like a lot of organizations, has a lot of turnover too. So when we start working with like a director of facilities and we start putting plans in place, about the time when we get to that execution part, then they go through some turnover and then we kind of start the wheel back over. But it's no different than what I've dealt with in the past. It's a good relationship. I ran into President Mosley at Schulte's over the weekend and we had a good conversation on what's going well, what we can improve, and we have some meetings scheduled for tomorrow actually. So from that standpoint, it's a great relationship. It takes both of us to make it work and it takes both of us to fail. So we are working through a lot of things. The other partnership that I'm very happy about is recently we've teamed up with United Capital Soccer Club. That's a project that, you know, it's going to impact the local community with the events that they bring, not only for soccer, you know, because we're not in the soccer field, but we are assisting in that. So, you know, we're looking for ways to find tangible partnerships within the community that can better serve those that we serve within the community. So I'm also pleased to work with Tom Chapman on that and the role and the goals that they're trying to accomplish there.
Mr. Chairman.
You had talked about some cost recovery reports. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So what it is, it's basically an assessment or an analysis of, like, I'll pick on swim lessons. If we do swim lessons cost recovery, we take what the lessons, what it generated as far as revenue, and then what type of expenses were incurred, whether it's salaries, overhead cost, any type of supply cost, and then we take the two and we divide it and come up with our cost recovery to make sure it meets the model that we have in place as far as, you know, we feel like J.C. Parks programs, adult programming in most cases should generate 100% of the revenue, if not higher. Now, as you start to break it down on community events and youth events, that percentage does go down a little bit lower, but this also challenges us and motivates us to find other ways to help offset some of those costs, whether it's through corporate sponsorships, et cetera. So that's what the analysis is, basically to see, based on the revenue and the expenses, where it falls within our goals of subsidies. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Just a real quick follow-up. The all-inclusive park, I think, would really be a great asset for our community. I know you hit a little bit on it, but do you have a little more of a timeline or more detail on the process?
Yeah, so a survey actually went out, a community survey went out yesterday that Craft and Toll had crafted. They sent it to us, we reviewed it, made modification. It went live yesterday, so anybody's encouraged to go out there. It's on the J.C. Parks, it's got the link on there. You can fill that survey out. And then we have a community forum meeting scheduled for next Thursday, March 27th from 5:30 to 7 at McClung Park. So then local community members can kind of come in, meet with Craft and Toll, learn more about their first round assessment, offer feedback, suggestions, what in their mind, what they envision for this park and playground destination would be. So that's kind of the next step. And then from there, taking the feedback from the survey in person, they'll collect the data, they'll get back with us, come back in, visit with us, kind of share their information, talk about their ideas, and then kind of put a plan in place on how do we fund something like this. Because that was one of the, when we put the RFP out, that was one of the things that we wanted, is somebody that was going to also assist us on finding some external funding sources to be able to fund this project. So that was identified from day one. So they're going to also assist us in that.
Thank
you.
And then, of course, finding the location. They had top 3 before they left, but I hate to share it here because things change.
Well, the soccer complex might be a good area for that.
Yeah, and so when we put the committee together, we also extended the invitation, not only when it came to the project, but selecting the firm. We had representatives from the Special Learning Center at the table as a committee member. We had Leslie Bickle, who's I call her community advocate. That's the title I gave her because she's a go-getter. She advocates for the right reasons. She was there. So we didn't do exclusively 2 J.C. Parks. That's not how we're going to operate. We brought the community in because their voice is super important.
Again, I think that shows the difference in leadership than what we previously had, and I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I just want to say I appreciate the fact that the whole purpose of this exercise, that you understand what is potentially on the horizon. You all have things put into motion that can address that. So that is good news.
Yeah. Well, we thank Sheila and her staff for all the reports to kind of keep us in front of all that as well. So I have to thank her as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony.
Yep.
Brimmer, welcome to the city. I know you're new here, and we all relatively are still new here, so we're basically just wanting to hear kind of your current situation with regards to funding and personnel and et cetera, and kind of what you think maybe the horizon looks like as our budget continues to tighten. And so with that, I'll just let you just take it away.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yep.
Made sure my belt was tight this morning when I woke up, and so that way we could have this discussion effectively. But on a serious note, really want to double down on what was just previously said. Appreciate all my staff and colleagues here in the room for helping me the last couple of weeks, trying to get me up to speed so I can even talk to you today. So appreciate the heck out of them. But when it comes to public works, obviously there's 2 sides of the coin there. When you're looking at enterprise funds versus non-enterprise funds and general funds. So obviously on the enterprise side, wastewater is the biggest number when we're looking at budget implications here. It is Eric Seaman ran me the numbers on how we're looking on revenue and good news on revenue when it comes to wastewater and how we're looking so far. Revenue projections are higher than what was budgeted, quite a bit higher. So I think as far as wastewater goes, we're in pretty good shape, actually really good shape. So obviously those are projections over the last 4 months or so. When it comes to the other enterprise funds, obviously when we're talking enterprise funds, there's ability to recover costs that potentially may need to be looked at. When we're talking about wastewater, there's going back to wastewater. Obviously, I think through 2027 we have a 5% increase on rates through 2027. Obviously, those are helping wastewater's numbers out. When it comes to airport parking, transit, is there a discussion to be had on revenue on the revenue side? So with that, any questions on enterprise funds?
I guess I just am surprised that each year we have to subsidize airport. I mean, I would think, it's I think state government and businesses, corporations. I think it's easy enough. We wouldn't have to subsidize it. I know we don't subsidize it a whole lot. I'm just surprised we have to subsidize it all.
Shuza, how does the fuel tax work out there as far as the airport? The fuel surcharge, that goes to the state, if I'm not, or do we get a portion of that?
So we get a portion of usage that occurs at the airport, that comes to us from the flying services, from when they sell. But really, the revenues that you're gonna garner from the airport are those fuel taxes, and then the rental of the individual hangars.
Ground leases,
Right,
basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Ground leases. So, yeah, those are the, I mean, when you're talking airport, that's airports everywhere. You're looking at either what you have to rent and what fuel you're selling and what services you provide. And, you know, given the type of airport that Jeff City has, being an amazing front door for all the businesses and whatnot that we have here, you know, there is quite a bit of cost when it comes to the airport. Obviously, any capital improvements that are done at the airport are generally funded at a high level from the federal government at least the 90%, sometimes 95% level. But we do have to come up with that cost share piece of it. So, don't know if I answered your question, and not sure I can fully answer that question right now. But you have a follow-up?
Well, just you know, when we last looked at our rental rates and things like that at the airport and compared to how it's changed in relation to other.
We can most certainly look at that and see if that's an option.
Mr. Chairman, so I know that the rates for ground leases and things like that have been reviewed multiple times by Eric at the airport. Eric Bauer stays on top of those things. He reviews the leases on a regular basis. There have been some cost changes, some increases in those over the last couple of years, but in most instances, those are leases that are negotiated for extended periods of time. And so that's where a lot of the rates come from, is from those leases that we have on the ground leases with the individual customers.
And I think the way the ground lease is structured right now, I do think, and Sheila, please correct me, but I think that it is, each year, is it inflated by CPI? Or
Most of them do have an inflator on them. Brian, you would do the contracts. Is it a CPI increase type thing? I think most of them have a flat increase, to be honest with
Okay.
you. It's a
Yeah, it's
percentage every year.
Yeah, we have essentially a rate schedule that's drawn out for 30 years or something like that, so, but it's approved by the council.
And some of those leases are extended period leases. So we may have a 20-year lease, a 30-year lease. I mean, some of them are quite lengthy. And so, you know, that essentially prevents changes in the rates to occur because we've set those up in leases.
But we can get I can talk with Eric Bowers at the airport. He may already have some numbers on how we compare to other folks, just so you have that information.
Thank you.
I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, the airport, the city basically maintains the grounds, maintains the runway, and does all that stuff. We're spending a lot of money out there, but the city doesn't really get that much revenue from the airport. I mean, like, the flying service is a privately owned entity, so if you go out and want to rent a plane, I don't think the city gets any of that.
That is
Maybe the
correct.
tax office. So, yeah, the ground leases would be one thing, but as far as like, I think we do get some of the fuel surcharge, but not a lot of it. But I don't know, and I appreciate your question because I think we gotta be looking at everything right now, but I don't know many other ways to generate revenue, you know, from an airport. Really, the school is probably the biggest generator of revenue, and it's privately owned. I think the whole thing is privately owned.
Some airports, just didn't look this up because it just popped into my head, I'm sorry, but do we get landing fees for every time somebody? Well, I know the bigger airports, every time you touch down, there's a $100 fee or whatever. It depends on the weight of the aircraft landing too. But I don't know if that's something we.
No, I don't don't know.
And I wouldn't know how to even begin or even look
I
at
think
that.
you probably have to pay something to land there, but I don't know really who do it. I mean, I know, and maybe they waive it if you buy fuel, something like that. I don't know how that necessarily works, but. Any more questions on Enterprise? All right, go ahead.
All right, general fund streets. Obviously, when it comes to level of service in our streets, looking at one of the main issues, no matter where you're at, is what are the street conditions? And thankfully this year, we're looking at a street program to the tune of about $2 million. But for a community this size, the amount of lane miles we have, over the years, I would contend, looking at past numbers, that when it comes to streets, it's not enough to maintain what we already have when it comes to just our overlay program and everything else. Our streets staff does a lot. I mean, they wear a lot of hats. Obviously, an important one is filling potholes and sealing cracks and everything else. But when it comes to streets and expansion, when we don't have the revenue to expand, we need to maintain what we have and try to do that as cost effective as we can. And it definitely means looking at ourselves, at our core, what we have, and maybe the nice projects that we really want to do have to go on hold a little bit. It's just how it goes. But of course, when it comes to equipment and materials, trying to be as efficient as we can, trying to work with our other departments and sharing as much as we can. That's continuously we will look at that. But I think the reality is that if revenue's not going up and our sales tax is declining a little bit, we've got to maintain our system, what we have right now, as best as we can, and maybe even look at potential places that we can reduce the system we have. I know that's not popular, and that's not something we want to talk about. But if our revenue's down, we got to maintain the core of what we have, and looking at fun projects. And I'm a projects guy. I know when I interviewed to come here, it was lots of talk about different projects and how much we as engineers, David's sitting back there and he's probably cringing listening to me talk about this, because we love projects, right? We love doing new things, but those projects can also be maintaining what we have with the funds that with what we can afford, right? So with that, any discussions on streets? Any questions?
I know you're brand new, so I don't expect you to answer this. You can send it to us in an email, but can you get us your best estimate? So I think this is before you started when we were doing some budget discussion. It's been noted that over the last 4 years, we've had about $4 million in supplemental costs to go just directly to our health insurance program to keep it afloat, more or less. Can you provide us with some estimates on how much road mileage that would be with regards to maybe a basic overlay or something like that? I guess there's probably, I have at your disposal somewhere, the amount of money it costs per road mile or road foot, or however you all do that. But if you could just provide an estimate of kind of what $4 million looks like with regards to street overlays and street updates and curbing, guttering, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, just provide that on email. I'll expect you to.
Yeah, certainly I'll get that put together for Brian.
Ask you that.
Well, I would just say our normal funding amount for street overlay, asphalt street overlays is 1.4 million, so that's about 4 years worth of overlays.
About 4 years.
3.5, 4 years. Is that about right, David? But as far as how many road miles that is, I don't know. I'm sure we could take our last 4 years. Well, last 4 is a little different because you all used some set-aside funds to do more. And I think we're doing that this year as well for a little bit more. So we've thrown more at it as we've had it. But a normal year is 1.4. This year, I think we're doing 1.8.
I just want the public to be aware of, what we're missing out on by decisions that are gonna have to be made going forward. So, Congress, Councilwoman.
I was wondering where that 4 million comes from, because wouldn't we go by this allocation number? Because that
4
would be
million.
assuming that they would be paying for all of it out of Public Works, right?
Well, 4.8 million is the previous 4 fiscal year supplementals that we have approved through the body.
Yeah, but that doesn't all fall on Public Works though. It would fall
Well,
on
it's just,
everything.
it's an opportunity cost of what we're not getting in this community because of what we're paying for healthcare. So my question, you're right, not all 4.8 million would have went to the roads, but it could have. And so, we could ask the same question to Chief Wildy and Chief of Fire and everybody else. What does this opportunity cost mean? So I understand your point, but there's an opportunity cost to this city of putting allocating so much money, especially at the end of the years, to our health insurance program. Any other questions from Mr. Bremer? Seeing none.
Did have, these are the only 2 departments, right? I mean, parks.
Don't let Clint say something.
I know that as part of I think it's the city code that we look at every year our fee structure for parking, maybe even fines possibly that we levy. Could we put those with an automatic escalator where it takes it out of the hands of the council to formally go through that process, and that it's just a formula, if you will, of how we.
Councilman Spencer, I think we're looking at that right now. I know Sheila has asked me to put some numbers, Brian, and so we're trying to put that together presently.
But right now, no, it's an annual process. We're in the middle of that process right now.
But the answer to your question is yes.
Yes.
Could do that.
Okay.
And a lot of towns do.
I think that would benefit the public. That it's not. Thank you.
But I think the way it's set up right now is that recommendation comes from the city administrator. And he does not really get permission to do it, but he just provides, here's the recommendation.
And unfortunately, I know our city administrator has been having to deal with other issues that have not been taken care of in the past. But not once that I can remember since I've been on council, that we've gone through that exercise.
Last year.
We raised them last year.
Well, on the parking only.
Yeah.
No, it's appendix 1.
We're talking about 2 different things here. So the parking is manual process, would have to be approved by city council, which we did last year.
Yes, we did.
The changes in other fees, so our administrative fees, is a process that is driven by the city administrator. He makes the changes, and then the city council, he sends them to the city council. City council has the opportunity to essentially object and make amendments. We did go through that process last year. It was essentially a CPI increase. no objections, so they went. It's not a bill or a resolution or anything that kind of goes through the ordinary course of business. It's more administrative tradition.
I think it's the only time we've done it though since I've been.
I would resist saying that. We have gone through that process in the past, but how that lines up with your personal experience, I don't know.
We've probably been more consistent with it in the past couple of years, and we have reviewed it every year as the city code allows for. We are currently in that process now and getting ready to work with the city administrator to finalize his recommendations. And we have talked about the fact that we would like to consider pulling the parking out of the individual pieces of the city code and adding them to Appendix Y. And so right now, that would be the expectation as well, is that we're working on that. So as we move forward, those would also be reviewed on an annual basis as part of the Appendix Y exercise.
Questions? The only other, if you provide us, just email with, on the enterprise funds, which ones are subsidized by the general fund and how much? I know you have that already.
Airport and transit, and I can provide those numbers out of, are we just talking about for FY25, for example? Is that sufficient?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to see.
Is it pretty consistent?
It is usually pretty consistent. We have had a couple of years where we had some extra funds allocated to us, for example, for transit, and so the subsidy that was needed was reduced, but typically it's pretty consistent.
Mr. Chairman, could be okay. I just want to make sure, as long as you feel like the numbers you're sending are a normal year,
Okay.
then 1 year is probably fine.
During the COVID period, there were some very substantial subsidies for transit, and so if you go back 4 or 5 years, it looked like the transit was going gangbusters. Well, that was a result of direct infusions from the federal government in the transit program. So I would be cautioned beyond a couple of years. And there was a tail to that as well.
There was,
That
and so I
affected
think
the
what we
budget
have for
year, so-
25 is a pretty normalized figure.
And that would be kind of generally what the pre-COVID numbers are. I imagine they were all about the same, all before 2019 and all that,
Yes.
2020.
They were very consistent.
Sir?
Thank you.
Well, you got 10 minutes, bud.
Well, I try not to fill all of that.
We appreciate it.
So our plant protective service is a little different than some of the other departments. We don't have kind of a lot of projects. The vast majority of our expenses are personnel. There are a few kind of what I would call kind of projects that we do have within, say, our protective services or our code enforcement section for demolition allotments. We also have some money that's budgeted this year for housing incentives. So outside of that, it's probably over 90% of what our budget is for staff salary. So there's, obviously we would take a look at all the items that we have within our budget if we needed to go that route. But it's, we kind of operate a very service-oriented department. Some of that is, for example, in the building department, that is something that there is a cost recovery there. We do, charge for those services. Property maintenance, usually recovers a fair amount of the amounts that the costs that we accrue for doing any type of abatement. Neighborhood Services has certain grants that administrative costs can be taken from those grants for a lot of staff work as well. Planning also has fees associated with it that offset some of the costs we can charge for applications, but there's a fair amount of work that they do that is just general service to the public. So that's generally an overview of our department, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions about Mike's budget? Seeing none. No.
I just mentioned, exciting week. We have a new building official on staff.
We do.
That position's been open for probably almost a year now.
Almost a year, yeah. So I think we
It's a long year, but I think we went up with a very good candidate, so we're looking very forward to getting him kind of up to speed and working on the building tasks. So.
Councilman Eilers.
It's just, thank you. I know I probably send emails to Brian and you a lot, and it's usually with the first word, how many older structures we have and you know, with the grass and all that. Do we recoup, are you even on recouping what it costs us to go? I mean, are those, how are we, do we get the money back as whatever we charge or however we, I forget what the words we use to assess them for us taking to do that? Do we have outstanding things that people haven't paid, or when you assess that and send that to them, do we generally recoup them pretty quickly or to that effect?
Generally, I think we receive, or we do see a fair amount of compliance and payment of those. If they aren't, if they don't get reimbursed the costs that we pay for things like mowing grass and cleaning up sites, that becomes a lien on a property. And we do see, once it gets to that point, we do see people then pay that lien as well. And we do have, I think, some statistics on the amount that we're recouping of our costs. And when we do go through the process of abatement, there's an administrative charge that goes along with that. I think it's $250 off the top of my head, in addition to the costs that were incurred for hiring a contractor per se to go out and mow the grass. So it's not necessarily, above and beyond, but it's supposed to recoup the costs that staff's time that they put into doing those cases and the processing. So it's not necessarily bringing enough costs in to cover the entire department's, I think, budget, but it does recoup most of the costs, I think, associated with going through the abatement process.
Yeah, we have to still expend money out of that your budget to do that, and I was just wondering how far that's drug out before we recoup the cost. Is that something that, when you say the abatements and all that, is that settled up at the end of the year, or is this thing drop till somebody gets a hold of it and has to pay for, they sell the dang thing, or
So there's a time frame there. So we'll do the abatement. We send notice to them that there's an invoice that needs to be paid. If it doesn't get paid after a certain amount of time, we send it to the city clerk, and that gets attached as a lien to the property. And then there's a certain amount of time if you don't pay the liens on your property, at which point then you're going to be probably in some significant issues with that. So usually it's a couple, 3 years that we see those liens stay on the property before then.
But for purposes of things like mowing grass and kind of small project cleanups, I think generally what you'll see is those get added to the taxes and they get paid in the same year. Where we're talking about are the large cleanups and then the demolitions. Those can extend out over several years and then kind of go into the tax sale situation. So it really depends on the nature of the abatement. Cutting grass, usually we're going to get that back within the year. But demos is probably the other extreme end of that.
Yep.
Those can get dragged out for a very, very long time as it goes through the tax sale, and then a lot of times we don't even get that back because they go up for retail sale after 4 years. Or after 3 years. And so it just really depends on the type of cost recovery.
I guess it's just for information that there are times that when we do, that's what I was getting at, is the demos and all that, if you read something, think, do we get all the money back from our revision? Stuff like that, that we may be out, money that people don't realize that, hey, as part of the city, we end up having to incur some of those costs just for the betterment of the city that, that people don't see every day in the paper and all this stuff.
Yeah,
So,
and
I just want people to be aware that, there are things that we incur the cost of that, we're just not gonna be able to recuperate.
And not to speak for Clint, but having done this for a little bit, and particularly on the demo side, so the percentage of cost recovery between your routine nuisance abatement, so your cleanups and your grass cutting and weeds and stuff like that, and then the dangerous building demos. Those are two very, very different things. And so cost recovery on kind of the more routine, typical things is very high. We do very, very good. But the demos is where you see the drop in what is able to be recovered. And so a lot of times it takes a little bit more effort to get that money. And so, particularly in the law department, what we see is a lot more filing of lawsuits personally against people to try to recover some of that money that took a very pointed approach to be more aggressive about that type of cost recovery. And while we're down right now on the kind of amount of active lawsuits and cost recovery claims that we saw an uptick over, in the previous 2 years of how many lawsuits we were filing against people to try to recover that. And we had pretty good success. But the nature, you're absolutely right. Depending on the nature of the abatement, the amount of cost recovery is going to vary greatly. And there's absolutely things that we do that we don't really expect ever to get paid for, but still need to do it for the public health.
The whole thing was just to make sure the general public would hopefully know that it's just a cost that we incur as a city as a whole, that sometimes you're just not going to get on stuff like this. You're going to get the money back that we have to expend, and that they realize, they think we got just a big pot of gold here, but sometimes there's just, with whatever it has to be, either demoed or whatever, we're just going to be out that, and that's just the cost of.
Just kind of echo him, just to make that point. Yeah, I think on our routine abatements, we do recover, I think, the costs associated with those.
I appreciate that.
Well, now that Eilers has filibustered almost all our time away, Councilman Lester.
In the recent past, we've leveraged technology, and especially with our inspections and using mobile apps, just to gain efficiency and have staff do a lot more with less. Are there more opportunities for that type of thing that you're looking into, or on that route?
No, you're absolutely right. And we've talked about it a little bit at Public Works and Planning, and I think it kind of come from the matrix study, but I'll keep it short. What we're working on now over the next probably 6 months process is transitioning to digital plan review. And so in short, what that means is instead of developers and our design professionals submitting hard copies, they submit PDFs. We review them internally. It makes transmission quicker. It makes the storage less. So there's a lot of, we think, if it's not hard costs, some soft cost savings and time savings is going to come along with that. So that's something we're going to start working on. We haven't quite got it going yet. We've got some staff that we need to get on board. But I think this year we're going to be ready to go. So as long as I can work it out with Sheila to get what I need. So short-term investments for long-term gain.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for participating and coming up, and I wish I guess we got 4 council folks that will be here for next year, and wish you all the best. And it was what is going to be a very, very tough situation. So again, thanks to everybody, all directors who testified. Ms. Sheila for helping us out on the finance side. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?